We have seen the models at the destination level. Now let's get granular. What about the many communities that make up a destination? An essential component of impact tourism is that programs be developed in partnership with host communities. We've all seen too many cases of well-meaning programs that backfire because no one consulted the community meant to benefit. I was just at the Adventure Travel World Summit in Sweden, where I heard Talib Rafai, the former Secretary General of the UNWTO, say, and I quote, "There's no future for travel and tourism if you're not welcome and embraced by the local community." True dat. I'm excited to introduce the moderator for this panel, Paula Vlamings, because she's a friend I haven't seen in a couple of years. She's also the Chief Impact Officer of Tourism Cares, a nonprofit organization whose members are among the country's largest travel companies and associations, and whose mission is to support the people and places the industry depends on. Before that, Paula headed up the Planetera Foundation, the nonprofit arm of G Adventures. But I think one of the most interesting things was what she did between these two jobs. Paula and her husband, John, sold their belongings and spent 2 years exploring South America in a camper truck. And this was before the hashtag van life was even a thing. Paula, where are you? There you are.
Thank you, Nori. I have the unenviable position of being cold and right before lunch. So I really am pleased that this panel is going to be so inspiring because I know them all well and I know their work. So I just wanted to share a little bit more about Tourism Cares. Our mission is to advance the travel industry's positive impact for people and places to thrive. We are a coalition of 160 travel industry companies and associations, and we are supported by them, and we're really a B2B organization. We're working to support their efforts in the communities where they sell trips and to support the training and the education for them to be more sustainable, for them to understand their role and their responsibility in the travel industry. So we've been evolving our mission over the last year and a half, similar to Crest, I think, in terms of moving less from a philanthropy model and more into an impact tourism model. Really working, traditionally we've been very focused on uniting the industry to give back, and now we're really looking at how do we leverage the 160 companies that we have at our table. So we're also focused on supporting their CSR efforts, from being external to their business to being more internal into their CSR efforts. So we also do that by creating these meaningful travel summits where we bring the industry into communities and we connect them to the organizations and the people and the leaders like you're going to be hearing from today. I'm really honored to be here, and I really thank Crest for putting the voice of the community and the community perspective on stage. I go to a lot of travel conferences, and it's frustrating to me that the people who are most affected by the corporate decisions are rarely on stage talking about their experiences and their needs from their perspective. So today is an opportunity to do that, and I'm really happy to do that. As Nori mentioned, I was the executive director of the Planetera Foundation, where we incubated these small businesses, women-owned businesses, indigenous communities into the tourism supply chain. Planetera worked to incubate those businesses and help them really be part of the business tourism supply chain. So one of my highlights at that time at Planetera was bringing Women on Wheels into the Planetera program for G Adventures. So I'm going to introduce Mina first. Mina Videra is a feminist social entrepreneur who is working towards sustainable livelihoods with dignity for the resource poor in India. Her Women on Wheels initiative provides employment opportunities to female drivers, which in turn create wealth and value for them individually, and at the same time offers safe transport options to customers who are mostly other women. Women on Wheels is proudly supported by a small group adventure operator, G Adventures, which is a pioneer in community tourism space. G Adventures uses Women on Wheels to provide transport for all of its travelers arriving to Delhi, and it is also supported by the launch of the project with new vehicles, funding, and training. Since its launch, Women on Wheels has helped support more than 2,000 women gain employment and provided more than 1 million safe rides. A graduate of the London School of Economics, Minu has backed women's rights both nationally and globally over the last 30 years. And in 2018, she received the International Inspiration Accolade at the IBM iX Every Woman in Travel Awards in London, United Kingdom. So I welcome Minu and the rest of my panelists to come on up on stage.
I need to, okay. Just click on this.
It should be just the big green.
Okay.
Would that work?
Yeah, thanks. Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for having me here. It's a privilege to be able to share with you about our work. I feel like a little bit of an immigrant to the world of tourism because we started this work, and I always identified myself as somebody coming from the women's movement, feminist space and the idea that we started this was really about livelihoods with dignity to resource-poor women, till such time as we reached a point where one of the key sources of livelihoods was through the tourism sector. So I have only, over the last few years, started identifying more in this space, but let me just go ahead with my journey. So I bring to you Khushi. Khushi is one of our drivers. Before joining Azad Foundation, Khushi used to work as a part-time house help, and she was earning irregular monies, as you can see. And today, as we talk, Khushi is a faculty. She worked for many years as a commercial driver, and today she teaches other women how to become drivers and she's become a principal breadwinner to her family. We meet Kiran, another of our drivers, and again, she was earning irregular money. She was married at a young age, and she is a survivor of domestic violence. Today, she is a very confident commercial driver earning upwards of $250 per month and being a major contributor of income to her family. So just a little bit about, where do Khushi and Kiran and many other women like her come from, and the reason we started this initiative. For us, a couple of problems that we were trying to address. The first is the whole issue of violence against women, not just in India, but also, as per the UN statistics, 1 in 3 women in the world suffer violence. And violence not just does not allow women to choose the livelihoods to make decisions that they want to, but it also goes towards towards making public spaces less safe for women. So this was one of the problem areas that we were trying to address. And the other, more specifically in India, where women's participation in labor force has been going down over the last couple of decades, from 34% to 26% in 2016, at a time when the country's gross domestic product has been increasing. I mean, of course, women around the world, I think the statistics were shared this morning, they do not participate in workforce as equal partners everywhere. There is a vertical and horizontal segregation in the labor force as far as women are concerned, but it is far more pronounced, and so that itself becomes a challenge, especially more so for resource-poor women with whom we have been working. So our response, there were 3 different categories in which we can put. The first is to understand that for women who are from resource-poor communities, it's not a question of individual women making choices to come and work, but to build an enabling ecosystem in these communities. And through our partner, we work with young boys about what alternate forms of masculinity can be, how they can support at home, how they can contribute to making streets safe. And we support young women to become feminist leaders and build a solidarity network so that women who choose to become chauffeurs, which is a very non-traditional, very different kind of a livelihood, are able to be supported and they can join this program. The other aspect is the kind of training that the women go through, because we understand the reason why we do not have enough women drivers, for example, in the world, or women as masons, or women as electricians, and in all these things, is not because women do not have interest to be into these professions, but because there are structural constraints which do not allow women to take on these occupations. So while one big component of our training programs is giving women the skills, we also work with them in order to address the structural causes. So they learn about, they learn about patriarchy, they learn about gender, they learn about violence, how to protect themselves, English speaking, communication, grooming, a whole lot of other things. We call it Skills Plus Plus. Our program is very learner-centric. We realize that, women's time is taken most for granted. So many times, even if they don't want to be, not coming into the program, but they have responsibilities, unpaid care work, whole lot of it. So we continue to, the women who join Azad Foundation to come into to become professional drivers. The program is very learner-centric, and they learn at their own pace. And finally, the whole aspect of solidarity, because at the end of the day, one of the things which women lose out most on is friends, a solidarity network, especially as they, particularly if they are living in very difficult situations and in very vulnerable circumstances. So the way the entire training program is designed is to make sure that they are able to build this, solidarity network. And the third most important component of our response to the problem is to really open up new jobs and markets, because, okay, so we train women and they become professional drivers, but unless and until there is business, how do they sustain? And that is where opening up new job markets becomes very important. In 2008, when we started, there were hardly any women professional drivers in the entire North India. And today, as Paula just said, we've been able to support more than 2,000 women to become professional chauffeurs. We've been able to do this through our training partnerships. So it's so there is an Azad Foundation, which is a not-for-profit, which does the training, and Azad Foundation works with other NGOs as well in different parts of the country. And then, they take care of all the training work that is done. On the other hand, we have Sakha, which is a for-profit. So these are two different institutions. And Sakha engages with the market. Both Azad and Sakha were set up in 2008 with the purpose of bringing resource-poor women and providing non-traditional livelihoods to them. And as of now, Sakha has all these different partnerships in terms of the markets. Our partnership with Jade Ventures started in 2014 when we were beginning to look for, as we were having more women drivers, and, we wanted to, in the beginning, it was more of a B2C and retail clientele who would call up, but we wanted to expand our business, look for more institutional partnerships. And most of the places where we used to go to, they would say, yeah, great idea, lovely, we would love to support it, but we can't, do you have at least 20 vehicles or at least, a certain fleet size? And we would say, yeah, we don't have that size today, but we need to start somewhere. And so it was really heartening to build a partnership with Jade Ventures, who said, it's okay, if you have 2 vehicles, we begin with 2, and when you grow to 5, we begin with 5. So that's how the relationship began, and today we are taking care of, almost all of Jade Venture travelers who visit Delhi, and that contributes to 40% of the overall business. Some of the elements that have helped us grow is really basically focusing on business objectives, but also, like I said, the space to grow as per our needs, and also building a mutual partnership of respect where it is not just the business that is being contributed, but also opportunities at networking, etc. And the fact that the women drivers themselves, just by taking around, foreigners, people from different countries that they didn't even know, where they were on the map before, and how it has helped, enhance their own self-esteem. There is a book out there on our table called Lady Driver, which has stories of several women who have benefited from this. And together, the kind of impact I think that we have been able to create where, not just that women become principal breadwinners, the fact that we are able to contribute to safe ride experiences to more than 1 million women, million safe rides, but it is also about the immense social gains that the women have been able to make for themselves, moving from invisible to visible citizens, and most importantly for me, where they also learn to say no to violence in their own private and public lives, and an intergenerational impact, because every woman who has been able to empower herself is able to therefore offer a completely different trajectory of growth to her children. So I think I will just stop there. Thank you very much.
So I often say in some of the talks that I give, and just in general about the work that we do in terms of empowering local communities, that every traveler needs to eat, sleep, shop, and needs transport. And I think one of the things that's really special about Women on Wheels and what Minu is doing is that the transportation piece, a lot of times companies don't think that the transportation part of their experience or their tour can really have an impact. And so that's I use this example a lot because this is really a way to empower the local community by just switching your transportation from a regular transportation company to a social enterprise like Minu's. The next two panelists that we're going to hear from fall into that stay category. The first one is, I'm going to introduce, is Claudia Barongo Ogoti. And Claudia is a young, dynamic Kenyan with a BA in sociology from the University of Nairobi. Claudia joined the Maasai Wilderness Conservation Trust in 2016, supervising payment for the ecosystem services for carbon and tourism. She specializes in dealing with the indigenous community's needs and issues. She joined Kampi Kanzi in 2016 and transitioned from guest manager to host, camp manager, and host. She's led various air safari expeditions visiting Tanzania, Zambia, Malawi, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and South Africa. Thank you, Claudia.
Good afternoon. Now, Out of Africa is one movie that has inspired travel to Kenya and in general Africa. But as the tourism industry, we do not fully understand that if we do not today put mechanisms in place that are going to guarantee the protection of these resources that we go visiting, including the wildlife, the landscape, and the culture, these resources might not be available in the next 20 years. So, in the lifetime of just my father, that is, by the way, 62 years, and this is a map that goes back to 67 years, we have lost 70% of the African elephant. We've managed to lose 95% of the lion population in Africa. Now, apparently, there is more polar bears in the world than there are wild lions in roaming in Africa. And as you can see, the human population in Kenya has exponentially gone up, so has the livestock numbers of the Maasai. This really goes to show that we need to provide economic value for the communities coexisting with these, with wildlife in these landscapes, if there is hope to protect or to have these places to go visit in the future. Now, just like. Wildlife pays is a term that we coined as a Kampi Kanzi with our partner NGO Maasai Wilderness Conservation Trust, and we mean that literally. We impose a charge of $115 per guest per day of guests visiting Kampi Kanzi, and this goes towards compensating the Maasai for their losses to predators, lions, cheetahs. Now, some of you may not know, but the Maasai community is a pastoral community. And for us to ask them to tolerate losses from these predators, we need to give them an economic compensation for it. There is no really need for me to go into that. But since the commencement of the program, we've managed to understand that the lion population in this part of Kenya has gone up, even to the extent of actually repopulating the national park that borders us. So it goes really to show that we need as the tourism industry to put in more effort. Also, we have as a charge of $1 a guest a day that goes to offset or whatever footprint our guests may have by simply visiting us, including the air transfers to and from Kampiakanzi. And I only mention these categorically because we offset it to the Chulu Red Plus Carbon Project. Now, this becomes the second payment for ecosystem in the land. And as you can see, we've sold most of our, well, not really most, Gucci and Tiffany Company have been part of our buyers. The other project we're trying to run in the land is the Chulu Hills Blue Plus Water Project. Again, another project that goes to demonstrate to the Maasai that the natural resources can be economically valuable to them, and to give them reason to not start, say, agriculture or build a cement factory in the middle of, an animal corridor or a land where humans are coexisting with wildlife. This, by the way, just a sec. The previous slide. This is a project that is in the pipelines, and if we're able to put it up and running, we are able to benefit 7 million beneficiaries at the cost of Kenya, who are, by the way, paying nothing for the water they receive coming up from the Chulu Hills. These, by the way, are green hills. These are the green hills of Ernest Hemingway of Africa, just for reference. And further on, to show the impact of what tourism can have, we employ, together with the Maasai Wilderness Conservation Trust, we employ more than 300 local people, among them the only doctor in the ecosystem, a couple of nurses and health workers that move from village to village offering health services. We support over or close to 9,000 students, scholarships at primary, secondary level. Excuse me. And without regressing too much, can we understand that by visiting properties like Kampiakanzi, your direct impact is immense, not to mention the donations that our guests make when they come to Kampiakanzi. For instance, 10 hippo rollers that just turned into 50 hippo rollers, which are going to ease the work of the ladies, or a guest that understood the ecological degradation of a very important wetland and decided to provide a grant that is going to protect it for the next 30 years, including building a school camp in this wetland. That means we're going to have more students, or we're going to have students from Europe, from your world, that are coming to visit this part of the land, understanding more the Maasai culture and the whole ecosystem in general, which means more dividends or more income for the community. Sorry, there's I'll just skip that. But again, without really talking too much on what philanthropy can do on this, we need to find ways for communities to be self-sustainable, to self-fund, because philanthropy can contribute to the general economy of the economy, but we cannot let it be the future. We need to make communities be self-independent. And as you can see from my graph here, currently philanthropy through major grants like the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation funding us $1 million a year, we like that, or we appreciate that, but we need to work on payment for ecosystems like ecosystem tourism, or Red Plus project, or the Chulu Plus project, or even cattle, or whatever it is. We need to make the land more productive for the people if we are to hope tourism to be present in the next 20 or so years. Thank you.
Claudia comes from one of the most beautiful places on earth, and the work that you're doing to protect the community and the environment is really amazing. I'm going to slide right off this stage, I bet you. Cody, I'm going to introduce you, and I'm going to tell a little bit about your background, but you're going to have to help me with the pronunciations because I know I'm not going to get this right. Coyote Nelson is the executive director of the Nawalaku Healing Society and a visionary of that lodge, a healing center focused on language and culture resurgence that is supported by an ecotourism enterprise. Coyote was born Yalis in BC in 1973. He holds a chieftainship position with the Wayukwayami clan of the Dawanzu Exunu. He takes great pride in the responsibility that comes with such a position amongst his people. He is a renowned dancer who has mastered all of the great dances of his tribe, and he is a striving song keeper and conductor, a position bestowed on him for his love and passion for his culture. He's also an accomplished artist and designs tradition regalia for the potlatches and commissions. Please welcome Coyote.
Okay, great, thank you. Qila Kesla Nashnamut, welcome my friends. While as Mutlin Noke Kastukwa Klus Khotnala makes my heart happy to see you today. I come to you today from a very small tribe in the northwest coast of British Columbia, Canada. We are the Tzawadinok people, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about our vision on how we are going to use tourism to help some of the health and wellness that is desperately needed in our communities. Canada, much like other countries, does not have a good history when it comes to their Indigenous people. This residential school that you see pictured here was this very school that my father went to when he was 6 years old, taken away from the nourishment of his grandparents and his loving parents. Reconciliation in Canada is a big topic at the moment, and this project is at the heart of reconciliation through philanthropic money. Our people, the Kwakwaka'wakw, occupy the northern part of Vancouver Island and the adjacent mainland. The rest of the world is starting to understand about our territory now because it's got a fancy term called the Great Bear Rainforest. And it has now become a huge travel destination for major tourism companies all over the world. My vision, our vision, is to capitalize on that tourism because for many years people have been coming into our territories and our people never benefited from it. And I wanted to capitalize on that tourism opportunity. But I also, in the back of my mind, want to help our people with the much needed healing that needs to happen in our communities. And so our season, tourist season, generally runs from about mid-May to this time of the year. And then the tourists leave. And my vision is that could that ecotourism lodge that we are going to build, this 9-room resort, be transformed into a health and wellness, language revitalization, cultural revitalization for our people. The main reason I wanted to create this 9-room resort in our traditional territory was to create a presence again, once again in our traditional territories. Up in Canada, they took us off of our land many years ago and put us on what they call Indian reserves. And the sole purpose of that was so that resource extraction could be done a lot easier without us being out on the territories. And so I wanted to create a presence to once again protect those lands. But then I realized that I could create a presence, protect the land, and create profit at the same time. And what do you do with that profit? My idea is that the money generated during the ecotourism season funds the programs that is much needed in our communities. You could see the language revitalization, the cultural revitalization, and the much needed wellness and healing that has to happen to move forward as a people from our history, our sad history. We believe that this model could be used and will be used all across Canada once we prove that this first one can be done. And it probably will be used worldwide, where we use indigenous tourism to help fund the wellness in those native communities, because we aren't the only communities that are suffering from our past. Like I said, this journey that I've been on has had a lot of help from the reconciliation movement that is happening in Canada at the moment. People are feeling the need to help First Nations, and it is through philanthropic money so far that we are going to be able to do this. You can see that our vision is to have our past iconic traditional big houses, but in a very modern architectural flair of today. And we will be building in the most greenest standards available today. We have an architect that is actually part of the Living Building Challenge, and so we are very super excited about that. A big part of our vision is the stewardship back in some of our river systems. And so that presence that I talked about will definitely benefit the rivers, because I know there's a big talk about sustainability today, and how do you sustain this ever-growing need to come to places like ours, a beautiful place in our planet. And so the reason why we are doing it a 9-room resort basically is to keep the numbers, the volume down, and we will just drive, it'll be a pretty high-end product. But the idea is that we get into our river systems, and then that we could probably do satellites from this main building to protect other river systems in our traditional territories. And so we won't actually physically grow from this one. We will just grow in terms of satellites and then build capacity. And so this is a super, super exciting project that I'm really proud of. We are currently at about 85% secured funded for the first phase, which means that we will be doing language immersion programs this time next year, which I'm super excited about. And so I'm here to collaborate and to gain experience. This is definitely not what I'm used to doing, speaking at world tourism conferences or anything. So I'm a bit nervous, and I encourage you to come and ask me questions, and let's get to know each other, and so I could ask you questions. So thank you.
So now I'm going to ask everyone a couple of questions, and then I think we'll open it up to, we have 10 minutes, and then we'll go really fast. All of you have spoken about how the business of tourism is supporting the communities where you work. I'm just wondering if there's anything that you'd like to share with this room who represent the industry, sort of what you've learned, and advice for them on working with community organizations and environments.
I would just say that, in a lot of times, people just need an opportunity. And, sometimes, we have there are lots of people who say, oh, we are ready to teach you skills. We will tell you how to do a strategy and how to do marketing. And a lot of times, it's just that we know all of that, but we just need an opportunity. We just need a business opportunity to increase and make to develop our business and make an impact. So I think it's important, one, to first ask what people need, and secondly, to build partnerships which have a mutual respect. So it's, G Adventures is a very large company, but it's because we have been able to build a mutually respectful relationship that we have been able to work together for 5 years.
Speaking on behalf of a community, I would say, or my advice to a couple of agents or travelers in general would be conscious of the choices you make. just like you choose to be vegetarian for ethical reasons. When you decide to send guests to a certain destination, I know profit at the end of the day is at the core of what you do, but do research about the properties you're sending your guests to. Sometimes guests don't know where they're going. They rely on the travel agents to tell them best. So my advice would really be to be conscious and send guests or be visitors of places that are part of community development projects or strategies. Don't end up sending guests to places that encourage elephant riding or poaching, for instance, or in South Africa, for instance, where there's a lot of encouraged kind meeting. Let's boycott these places. Let these places feel the impact of, missing out on opportunities of tourism. Maybe then they will make different decisions. But yeah, on behalf of communities like us, choose projects that directly or honestly impact the communities.
Thanks, Claudia. This is a question that's the same but a little different for Minu and for Claudia and Coyote. Can you explain sort of the connection between protecting the environment, so sustainable communities and environment, and how those are connected? And for Minu, sustainable livelihoods and sustainable tourism. How is it sustainable tourism is really translated into the environment and the livelihoods that you're creating?
Where I come from, sustainable tourism goes hand in hand with the culture, goes hand in hand with the land. And as my boss would put it if he was here today, it's a triangle of conservation. And land is at the base. If we do not protect this land that the wildlife depends on, that the livestock depends on, then the people depend on, then we will not have the tourism. Consequently, the culture will be lost. So what is the importance of it? It is really three interconnected joints that if one breaks, the rest disintegrates with it.
Thank you. And I think from our perspective, the reason we set up Azad Foundation, which is a not-for-profit, and Sakha, which is a for-profit, and was to make sure that the initiative Women on Wheels is not just dependent on grants, and therefore, so Sakha is a social enterprise where all the money that is earned goes back into deepening the business. And it was important because, like I said, in 2008, there were no professional women drivers. So the enterprise needs to needs to become financially viable. And that's so that the livelihoods can sustain over a long period of time and women can make sustainable changes in their own lives over a period of time. And I think tourism being a sector which probably is one of the few sectors which provide employment opportunities to many more women, that's where the connect happens, and that's where it helps to generate livelihoods which are sustainable and which are also what we say livelihoods with dignity. So it's not just, women across the world end up putting in a lot of time into livelihood. So it's not just that they make a little more money, but they make enough money to make transformative changes in their lives. And that's how we look at the sustainability of it.
Yeah, I think I forgot the question, but
What is can you explain the importance of the connection to sustainable tourism and the sustaining of your culture and the environment, and how the environment and the culture are very connected for your community?
yeah, so going back to that one slide where we wanted to create a presence in our territory, the land is our culture, and when you take that away from us, and that was another reason why they put us on these Indian reserves, was to try and cut those severs, right? And so we now know through lots of studies that, in Canada anyway, that when our people start stewarding the land again, the land benefits. And so what we have seen through our ecotourism company called Seawolf Adventures, what we have seen and what really planted the seeds for me that this idea is a good idea was I seen the personal growth in the guides of Seawolf Adventures when I was when I worked for them. And just that personal growth that our guides were taking, where they felt good about who they are and where they come from, instead of just years and years of not feeling good about who we are as First Nations people. That was totally transformed in a matter of one season, where European clientele are asking you about your people and where you come from and how your people lived. It did something to our spirits, and people were walking taller and looking people in the eye and got a bounce to their step. And so those were the benefits that I seen firsthand, and I wanted to share that with more of our people. So that's why we're going to do this.
That's great, Coyote. I think we should open up for some questions if anyone in the audience has some questions for these folks. You're all hungry, aren't you? We've got one just about.
Hi, thank you. This is directed to Coyote. There have been efforts from other First Nation communities to build up training programs and ecotourism projects along the central coast of British Columbia, and I'm wondering if you have shared best practices and had an opportunity to collaborate with any other of the First Nations.
Currently, no, but we totally intend on talking to Doug Niesloss up in Klemtu, and it's just our schedules are so crazy and we haven't had a chance to meet yet, but we're still in really early days with this, but I definitely plan on going up there. I'm also going up to Haida Gwaii in the Charlottes to learn from them as well. And so it is a learning process. Our people haven't been involved in tourism for very long, but we've seen it in our territories. And finally, we feel that it's our turn to tell our stories, because our stories are being told by other people anyway, so it might as well have come from us.
We've got one more up there.
Hi, I'm Dominique from Elevate Destinations. Hi, Claudia. I wonder if you can comment on the conflict that can happen between sustainability and the values it may import in some ways and more traditional cultural values on the ground. I know culture is a living thing, but I know, for instance, with the Maasai and at Kampi, you may be providing jobs perhaps to male Maasai guides, but what does that enable in terms of marrying young women as opposed to, I know Kampi is very involved in reproductive education as well and making opportunities available for women, but if any of you can comment on some of the conflict that might happen, I think it's, might be worth looking at as well.
I'll be slightly controversial and say that sometimes it's good to disrupt cultures, because I think traditionally, if I can speak from our experience, culture, it can be, the cultures that we have inherited are also very patriarchal, are also very unequal. So it's important to be disruptive as well. And it's important to be prepared for the fact that there is going to be a backlash, So, and I think that cultures are dynamic, they change, and they need to change, and they need to, what I would say is that it needs, the impetus for the same should come from the communities rather than being, kind of coming in from outside in a sort of a more evangelical kind of a manner. And therefore that respect needs to be maintained, so that, because we know how we are going to, how much we are going to push and how we are going to take the communities along with us, So I think there has to be a healthy element of disruption as well.
You put it perfectly well, but just to add on that, change is coming with our communities, like it or not. And we might as well be on top of it and drive the change. In terms of, it's taken Kampi Akanzi 23 years to impact some of the change that we've had. We've gone with the pace of the community. Ours is, to make suggestions of where we can do things differently and allow the community to build up to that. We cannot impose or we cannot ask them to do exactly this. You can only suggest and we can drive the change, but they will be the final decision on where that really leads. So, yeah, that is basically it.
Anyone else? I think our time is up, and I think we're going to break. I want to thank these folks very, very much for traveling so far.